E46 Turbo Build Part 5. In today's video, we're going to rebuild one of these Disas, and we're also going to prepare it for boost. Before that happens though, I want to more thoroughly explain the total functionality of this unit. I'm also going to show you an inside view of all the internal workings. Okay, so here we have the typical M54 intake manifold. Now, I recommend for turbocharging to go to the M54B30 intake manifold. Those can easily support 500 plus wheel horsepower. I prepared one and installed it on the engine in a previous video. This one is just for demonstration and discussion purposes. Okay, so these intake manifolds are going to have a variation in runner length. We have these ones on the bottom here, which are fat and somewhat long. We also have these ones up top, which are going to be skinny, and they go the whole way to the cylinder head. When it comes to engine performance, during lower bouts of RPM, example being 800 to 3,700, the engine is going to benefit from a longer intake manifold runner. And then during the higher bouts of RPM, anywhere past that 3,700 mark, the engine is going to benefit from having a shorter, more direct path of airflow straight to the combustion chamber. The functionality of this Disa valve is going to do just that. It is going to directly change the runner length. So it is going to go into this hole right here. You have this channel right here, which as you can see, it goes right into. There is going to be this flap right here that opens and closes, which is now directly inserted into the intake manifold. So during that low to mid-range RPM, this flap here is going to be shut, which is going to directly block off a section of the intake manifold. The purpose of that is to force the airflow to take a longer path. It is going to enter through the throttle body port. It is then going to be forced to find a longer pathway before it reaches the combustion chamber, which again is better for lower RPM engine performance. It is going to increase the horsepower and the torque during that rev range. And then once the engine speed exceeds 3,700 RPM roughly, this flap will open up, which is going to allow the air to then find a more direct path straight into the engine, in which again is better for the higher RPM engine performance. Now that you know how the M54 intake manifold works, I'm going to revisit this M50 intake manifold, which we briefly discussed in the previous intake manifold video. Now, this intake manifold is going to utilize one runner length. These runners right here, a single fat runner going straight to the combustion chamber. Here is the throttle body port. Air is going to be drawn in through here. It is then on a direct path to the cylinder head, making this intake manifold useful for those people who are going to be revving their engine constantly. There is a time and place for an intake manifold like this. However, for a large variety of applications out there, including street cars, you can potentially benefit more from a M54 style intake manifold. Another benefit to retaining the Disa for a turbocharger application, it can actually lead to a faster spooling turbo. We now know the basic operation of this thing, but what makes it tick? I had to find out. So I cut one in half to see the inner workings. The reason why the body of this unit is so large is because it is a giant vacuum reservoir. That is all this big square portion is. Whenever this is installed into the intake manifold, you see this small hole right here? That is actually a little vacuum hole. That is how the Disa is able to store vacuum. Now back to the inside view, this right here is how the vacuum gets in. This little valve right here with a little rubber end. You see that? Whenever vacuum is applied to this little valve right here, the mouth on it is going to open up like this from the vacuum pressure. That is going to allow vacuum to become stored on this end and into the body of the Disa. Then, whenever vacuum becomes diminished in the intake manifold, there will be a vacuum force on this side, which is going to be sucking in this direction, which in return is going to force that mouth to shut and to seal off the Disa. So the vacuum becomes trapped in here the whole way up into here. It is then going to be patiently waiting at this valve right here, which is actuated by electronic signal from the DME, the engine computer. The vacuum is then free to move through the valve into this cap right here, which is sealed off with an O-ring. You see that? There's that little vacuum channel. It's going to come through here into this little pot right here, which directly opens and closes the flap via rubber diaphragm. Let's go ahead and do an actual test now. So here I have a Disa from an M52TU engine. As you can see, it is smaller compared to the M54 by quite a bit. I have a car battery and a little vacuum pump here. We're going to apply vacuum to that small hole right there. By using this vacuum pump, I am replicating the situation in which the engine's running. I'm applying vacuum directly to this body here, which is filling it up. There we go. We now have a bunch of vacuum stored inside of here. Now I'm going to plug it in. Okay, so now that we have vacuum stored in there, we're going to shoot it with 12 volts, and that should close the flap. You see that? Now, the cool thing is, whenever the reservoir is full, you get multiple activations. Check this out. And then eventually, the vacuum gets used up, and you get no action at all. It is now time to rebuild and boost-proof one of these units. What lies before us is a flock of Disa valves, some aged and weathered, others working properly. We need to rebuild one of these for the turbo project. It's going to be that one right there. Disa Rebuild Kit from none other than German Auto Solutions. This rebuild kit right here is the OG. It is not a duplicate, as there are many of those floating around. The parts that are used in this kit are aluminum. We have an aluminum flap, aluminum actuator, and then we have a long steel bolt here which is machined to tie this all together. The original equipment is composed of plastic pieces like this. Also, this kit is designed to get rid of the Disa pin, which is this right here. A lot of people are afraid of this thing. Ooh, Disa pin, you better look out for that. Okay, so before rebuilding one of these and preparing it for boost, you want to make sure it is even going to work properly before you put the work into it. There is a simple test. All you have to do is take your hand, close the flap, go to the vent hole back here, plug it with one of your fingers, release the flap. It should stop sometimes quarter or almost halfway. This is a M52TU Disa, so they're going to open up more than the M54 during this test. Okay, so with the hole still plugged, you can see the flap stayed put. It did not slowly open up or anything. That's good. Now, whenever you release your finger, watch the flap. See how it flips open like that? This is a properly functioning Disa valve. If you were to plug this up and it were to slowly bleed off like that with this still plugged, that means the diaphragm in here. There's a rubber diaphragm underneath this cap here that can rupture or rip. That would lead to the Disa not working properly. Example being this little rock star right here. It's been vandalized. It looks okay. So we're going to close the valve and test it, plug in it. Watch what this one does. It doesn't even try to hold itself. That means the diaphragm is definitely ripped underneath this cover, which you can replace by removing this cover. This Disa I do not care about, so I'm being rough with it because I have so many spares, as you've seen. I forgot how annoying these things can be. There we go. This whole piece comes out, but first you have to go in here, pop this cover off, like that, and then remove this little metal ring in here. Then you pop off this little arm, like that, and then this whole piece just pulls out, and here's the diaphragm. And as you can see, it is definitely ruptured. I know I wasn't the most gentle with this thing, but I assure you, all these rips are not for me. It was already ripped, as you've seen during the test. There she is. Okay, so let's go ahead and say that your Disa tested out properly. The diaphragm is fine. You can go ahead and do the more common rebuild, which is easier and tends to not lead to damages. The first step is we're going to pop off this cover, if you still have it. I see them missing sometimes. Pop it right off like that. And then remove this metal ring once again. There we go. Pop off the pivot arm from the actuator, like that. See that? Now they do supply you with a bread tie in the kit to hold it off to the side, like how this one is. See that? You're going to then take the included bolt and thread it into the actuator. Now, going to pop out the actuator. That one was actually pretty easy. They can be quite stubborn sometimes. There it is, the original plastic little actuator. You can just toss this aside, along with the small lock ring, because the kit comes with a new one. Now, moving on to the actual flap right here, we need to remove the pin which holds it into the body. Right there is the head of it. I'm going to get underneath it and kind of just work it out of the flap. And then usually using a pair of wire cutters or dikes, whatever you want to call them, just pull the pin out like that. Okay, so now the flap just comes right out like this. You also have the option to replace the seal that is in there, in which seals off the actuator. And usually they pop right out pretty easily. And then you just work it out like that. When it comes to the O-ring, that is usually right here, it is integrated on the M54 Disas, while the M52TU ones usually have a replaceable green one. See how it just kind of rolls right out of there? The M54 Disas, you have to scrape out all of the gasket material and then simply install the new O-ring that the new kit comes with. I already went ahead and put it onto the Disa, in which I'm going to rebuild. It is now rebuild time. I'm going to firstly install this bell crank seal. That is what German Auto Solutions calls it. Going to put it in there just like that. They simply press right in with just your fingers, just like that. Now this one, I actually had to go off camera to fully seat it. It was a tight fit, which is good. Furthermore, I also did add some adhesive around the outer diameter of the seal. You can see it kind of glistening in there. That was just as a extra precautionary measure. Okay, so the very next step is we're going to put some lubrication inside of the seal and also into the tunnel for the little actuator. Within the rebuild kit, you get a little packet of lubricant. It is called Super Lube. This is actually pretty good stuff. They also supply you with some of these cotton swabs to help you apply the lubricant. Okay, going to put it inside of the seal and get it all lubed up in there. We now have the bell crank seal and the little tunnel for the actuator all lubed up. I cannot get over that name. Bell crank seal. Yeah, man, I lubed up my bell crank earlier and it felt pretty fucking great. She is now all lubed up in there. We have a big, large, gaping hole that's all wet. let's go ahead and install this flap now. This nice, beautiful aluminum flap from German Auto Solutions. Oh, wait. Okay, so they also give you some of this Loctite or thread locker here. We're going to put some inside of the little hole in which the actuator goes into. The reason why we put the thread locker in here is it is going to act as a joint compound between these two parts. Even though they're keyed to, mate into each other, it just helps them stay more secure. Time to shake it up. Just like that. Followed by installing the new aluminum actuator. We're going to make sure the flap is in the open position, just like that. See that? And then it should find its home. There we go. It is now inserted into the flap. Here we have a specially machined bolt, which is going to completely pass through the assembly and snug it all together. And then we're going to slide on this little lock washer here. Using a Allen wrench or Allen socket, going to tighten up the bolt. There we go. That feels really good. Like that. Oh, look at that. It actually pretty much seated itself. You can now see the actuator arm is on the actuator. It is now lock ring time. I'm going to put it on here. Just like that. Last but not least, we're going to reinstall the little cover. Just like that. No more plastic junk and no more separate metal pin. Okay, so as far as boost proofing the Disa, we're going to start off by plugging that small vacuum port that was right there. Originally was open like that. You can take a soldering iron and you can just melt the plastic around it to seal it off. That is the easier way. Personally, I took a self-tapping screw and I shaved the head way down so it does not interfere with the Disa flap. As you can see, it does not interfere with the movement at all. However, if I were to do this again, I would simply just melt the plastic to seal off the hole. After that is sealed off, we're going to drill a hole into the main body somewhere. You can do it anywhere, here, wherever, and then you're going to add a barb fitting. I put mine back here. I chose one that had a 1/8 inch NPT threads. Put it right in there with some thread tape and a little bit of glue. The reason we do that is because we do not want to send boost pressure into the body of this. The intake manifold in which this goes into is going to be seeing vacuum and boost pressure from the turbocharger. This was not designed to see those pressures. This little built-in valve that I showed you earlier, not being designed to see boost, it could potentially cause a malfunction of the Disa. It could potentially rupture or collapse in on itself. Not worth the what if. So we move the vacuum source from inside the intake manifold to outside of it, directly into the body, or the vacuum reservoir. And then you will put a check valve somewhere. I'm going to put mine right here, right in line with the barb. This is going to act the same way as that built-in valve did, but this one can actually hold up to the boost pressure. There we go. We now have an external vacuum source going into the body here. This check valve is placed in a direction which will shut as soon as positive pressure tries going inward, but it will be open whenever vacuum is applied to it. Now, once we have this installed onto the intake manifold, we're going to get vacuum here by running a small hose from the back of the check valve to the very rear of the intake manifold. The reason for that is to use one of these vacuum ports back here. If you plan to use these vacuum ports back here for anything, I always recommend to take a small drill bit and clean them out because they can get plugged up. Also, if you notice back here, do you recognize this? This is the same check valve I'm using for the Disa up there. This check valve is originally meant for the secondary air pump solenoid, which in my scenario, I'm not using on the turbo build. This intake manifold is just for demonstration purposes to show you how to use the vacuum ports and whatnot. But yeah, that's where I got the check valve from. Is this one back here. And here is the example. Check valve with a hose to the back of the intake manifold at one of those unused vacuum ports. Now we're going to test it, make sure it works properly. Going to fill it with vacuum. The check valve should shut once I quit pumping it, much like the original valve that was inside. As you can see, it is taking pressure. That is a good sign. Let's go ahead and give it some power and see what it does. Yep, seems to work. Perfect. Beautiful. And for the final test, just like the first time, works beautifully. Well, that's all for tonight's video. In the next one, we're going to talk about turbo stuff. We're going to modify this turbocharger for this project. We're also going to discuss further parts that we'll be using. If you learned something new tonight or simply enjoyed the content, feel free to subscribe to my channel as I highly appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later.